Before I started embroidering, I was knitting and crocheting, and you come out with very utilitarian objects as a finished piece. I was craving a more artistic outlet, and that's what led me to embroidery. Embroidery is decorating a canvas. It's almost like drawing on fabric with thread. You know, a really, really simple embroidery I could liken to a doodle or something. But when you get really intricate with your embroidery, it could be almost like an oil painting. It takes the same amount of time and technical knowledge and skill. I like embroidery because the barrier for entry is so low. If you have like $5, you can grab a couple of colors of embroidery floss, some fabric, and an embroidery hoop is $1. And it's very easy to get started. If you know a simple backstitch, you're like 90% of the way there. I think that most of my embroidery is based on this one stitch, the backstitch. And from there, you can take it in so many different ways. And then the rest is up to you and your creativity. Embroidery does take longer than one thinks, so patience is such a virtue. The way I select my subjects is I know that I'm going to be spending maybe even months embroidering something. So it has to be something that brings me joy, and that it has to be something that I find very fascinating. So whether that be a food I really, really love, or a candy I had in childhood, or a sea creature that I just find so fascinating, or even just like the way that a couple of colors interact with one another. I think most people are more familiar with embroidery in terms of decorated clothing. So a really nicely embroidered shirt, embellished bed sheets, curtains even. And I've done that as well. But honestly, embroidering on clothing is not super easy. Here is my big old collection of fabric. I have so many different colors, sizes. I feel like I embroider mostly on like embroidery hoops that you see hanging on the walls because it feels like my way of painting a little bit. I'm gonna cut out my fabric for the embroidery hoop. I'm going to use my phone actually to transfer the image onto the fabric. A mistake a lot of beginners make is to cut the fabric really close to the edge of the hoop, and that actually is not too great. I would recommend keeping at least like ½ an inch around all sides of your embroidery hoop. To put your embroidery fabric in the hoop, you just lay it right on top of that little inner circle and affix the outer circle. I pull it so that the fabric stays tight, and you can see there's almost a little bounce to it. I think that tracing an image onto your fabric first is key because I think just winging it is pretty difficult. I don't ever freehand my designs. I always go in with a plan. It'll keep you on track way easier, and your end result of your work will look way more neat than if you're freehanding your stitches. I would liken it to sketching before you paint. And you can make your embroidery designs as simple or as complex as you like, but I would just keep in mind that the more complex the designs are, the more time it will take. And it will look so cool, but that's what you have to keep telling yourself when you're pushing through the slow parts. So now I'm gonna take this back of my fabric and make it the front of my fabric by flipping it around in the embroidery hoop. Usually I'll have my traced images on the back of my embroidery hoop, just because I don't want to risk having maybe a pencil or pen mark in my final embroidery design on the front. This is your standard 6-stranded embroidery thread. Just make a little snip there. I only recommend using at most 2 or 3 out of these 6 threads. So I'm gonna split literally this thread. Embroidery is definitely a medium in that you're decorating a piece of fabric rather than creating the fabric itself. So in that way, you've got a little bit of art with the motion of embroidering, which is a craft. So we're gonna take our first stitch. We're always gonna start coming up through the back. I'm gonna start at this upper right-hand corner of the pot. What is key for a back stitch to make it look as neat as possible is to keep all of your stitches the same length. One of my favorite things about embroidery is that it's a really forgiving medium. If you don't like something, you can always rip out the stitches and start over, or you can even just stitch right over it. I've had so many embroidery projects where I'm like, I hate this, and then I'll just go over the work I've already done and not even undo it, but just stitch right on top of it. It kind of brings a more 3D element to whatever you're working on. But yeah, stitch away and really enjoy the process because it's really calming. I think a lot of people get into embroidery because it helps quiet the mind. I know I have kind of nervous hands sometimes, and having something to do with my hands makes it easier to focus on other things. Like sometimes if I'm listening to an audiobook or watching a TV show, it's really easy to get distracted, but once I have my hands full, it's so much easier to focus on life around me. I think embroidery being like a dry medium is really advantageous because you can just take it with you anywhere. It's really hard to take a half-finished painting with you on the go. It would smear everywhere, but because embroidery is not wet, you can just throw it in a bag and it's fine. You can build a whole palette off of, a handful of threads that fit really easily in a pocket or purse or bag. I keep a really small 3-inch hoop in my purse whenever I go anywhere. So on my commutes, I'll work on a piece. If I'm going to visit a friend in a park, it's really easy to take with me and just, take out of my bag if we're just chilling and I need to start stitching, Boom. And snip off my excess thread. I definitely put down pieces for days, if not weeks, if not months. What's great is that it doesn't go anywhere. It's never going to judge you. It's never going to, be mad that you ignored it for a few months. There's no paint that would chip or, lose color over time. It just kind of sits there waiting for you to come back to it. You can really see the stitches build as you go, and even just seeing that gives you such a sense of accomplishment. It's almost like a breathing exercise in a way. You're just continuing on with a steady motion over time, and that for myself and a lot of other people really just brings some peace to your mind.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to discover more hobbies and visit notjustahobby.com to learn more.